Shallow thoughts with Wabtech. We are in a simulation. We live in a simulation. The world is a simulation. No. This is a meme and or delusion people have for very good reasons. Now, I'm going to bring up just flat out the simple statement. If most of your proof you look up has been debunked because it was the work of somebody faking a video, or it was a video carefully edited to cut out the part that was the payoff that told you what was really going on, that was done by design to trick you. I want to point out something here that's very important. Like a person claiming, on my mother's grave or on a stack of Bibles, I'll make a claim. If you haven't noticed this, you can do this experiment yourself. While your mother's alive, go over and say, on my mother's grave, I swear that I'm a giant bunny rabbit. You might have noticed that nothing happens except maybe your mom will get a little annoyed by you. And saying, on a stack of Bibles, may God strike me dead. I have not sinned against any of you. Please put money in my... Yeah, every single evangelical out there is lying. Okay? There is literally no test to prove if someone is lying or telling the truth, including, yes, a lie detector, aka a polygraph. It doesn't work. Yes, I know you're going to find someone who says it, but unless the person believes it works, it doesn't fucking work. I know for a fact a polygraph test don't work because I know how to trick one. It's a fucking magic trick. Cause a physiological response in yourself that is under your control that normally wouldn't be. Put a tack in your shoe. At the moment you're about to say something benign, push your toe down on it, then it'll cause a physiological reaction because of the burst of pain going through your nervous system will cause you to have a physiological response that you can't fake because you're not faking it. And then when they ask you the really triggering question, don't have a reaction. It's based on relative reaction. If you're less worried about, quote unquote, or less biologically reactive to the subject, did you steal the stapler? I believe you have my stapler. If that doesn't get as much of a reaction as asking you, did you have lunch yesterday? Then they're going to assume you're telling the truth about not stealing the stapler. Next, some people don't have a physiological response because they're not reading you, asking them a question. They're saying, what they hear when you say, did you steal a stapler is, please tell me you're guilty. And your response by saying no is, I'm not going to tell you I'm guilty. They're not lying at that point. They're just interpreting what you're doing accurately. A cop asking you leading questions is trying to get you to say something incriminating. You internally saying, I'm not going to incriminate myself, you stupid fuck, means that you're not lying. You're saying what will work. Criminals get very good at that. Sociopaths more so. Some people are born without any physiological responses to emotion of any kind. They're Hannibal Lecters in wanting, in making. Let's cover some of the things people do. They look up YouTube videos that show proof that totally no one would ever lie on a stack of Bibles on their mother's grave on television. I have sinned. Yeah, if you put up a YouTube video, it doesn't even show the person's face, by the way. Let's point that out. This is totally proof of a glitch in the Matrix. No, it fucking isn't. It's a proof someone had some video editing skills, as minor as cutting off the part where you get to see what caused it, or as major as them literally just computer simulating it. All you have to do is do a really high-resolution computer simulation, clean up the imaging just a little bit, use Unreal Engine 2 or 3. 3 or 4 actually would do a good enough job you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you did it right. And then upload it to YouTube and let YouTube break the video. All YouTube videos are crap. No, they're totally proof. Seriously, hook yourself up to a slapping machine and never leave it. Okay? Birds caught in midair. In India, it was on a piece of monofilament or a thin piece of telephone wire or cabling. They tried to get it down, it flapped its wings a little bit, and then went back into the same pose where one wing was stuck up in the air, and it folded up the other one because it was in pain. It's a bird that's stuck on monofilament, fishing line, or something. In India, it is not proof that the Matrix is frozen. People cut off the part where they get up on a truck with a broom and try to knock it loose to see if it's alive. Once they figure that out, the rest of the video basically is missing, I think, but they get out a ladder, which is a very OSHA violating, and get up there and unhook the bird and let it loose, because it's kind of sad that it's stuck there. Other cases are birds flying or gliding into the wind, hovering in space, seemingly. Airplanes do the same thing. Or they just faked it. Other videos show planes doing the same thing, flying into the wind. Or the car is moving and you're getting a perspective change. I've debunked a couple of those videos. But no, it's totally proof of insert whatever thing you want to believe. If you're so desperate that you're willing to watch people whose entire YouTube channel literally says, "Hi, I fake videos for a living, I do it for movies," and you don't want to admit that maybe you're just reaching and desperately clawing at a reality you can't tolerate, then nobody can help you. And that's the next part. Can you fool yourself? I'll be doing that dead last. What about the car crashes into invisible barriers or invisible cars? Again, can someone fake that in a computer or just with video editing? Now, if you're saying that's not possible, I'm really good at detecting pixels, I've seen some shops in my time, you're already disqualifying yourself. You want to believe, so you will ignore things that disprove it. Well, just because 100% of the videos are fake doesn't mean, yes, it does. Yes, it does. The level of disproving that's caused by people faking shit cannot be ignored. If you actively ignore it, now I can point out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of works, scientific works, that prove that the semi-aquatic ape hypothesis is bullshit. I know it is. I still like it. It explains away a bunch of stuff, and it's fun to repeat. But I treat it like a story around the campfire. And most geeks who are into science treat it that way too. It's a stupid story you tell to see if somebody's going to buy it. No, we didn't evolve as a semi-aquatic ape. That's not real. The fact that we are fat enough we can float and have a bunch of characteristics that really closely match it is because someone looked for a hypothesis that would match all that. And a bunch of other shit doesn't, and they ignored it. That's why you tell it as a spook story. Because the scariest thing to an academic or a scientist is a story that ended up with us having to deal with this shit having to be debunked every couple of weeks for 4 years. So what caused the car to crash into something not visible? Someone editing out the top part of the video where you saw that it was a piece of cable from a cable car, or a piece of cable from a power line, or a tensioner cable for holding up the lights that had fallen that were also cut out at the bottom, that the guy drove into the cable and didn't realize it was there, drove over the cable, it wrapped around the wheel, if you look at it closely, and it took the entire front of the car and mashed it in because it was a beer can kind of vehicle body. Another example is Ghost Crash, a Vimeo portfolio, May 2018, by Donato Sanson. It's video editing. Real car crashes edited to remove what they ran into to make ghost cars. And the first thing that's going to come up for all of the non-doubting Thomases, you include Snopes as one of the links. Yes, I do. Because it triggers people. Snopes exists exclusively to find things that are bullshit and point out how to prove to yourself they're bullshit. Well, they have a bias and blah, blah, blah. And you're not going to address that they debunk things and are not wrong most of the time. They have been found to make mistakes a couple of times. Well, that's all there is to it. Meanwhile, the sources that a lot of you out there who want to believe we're in the Matrix so that you can make a fantasy universe, a lot of you will ignore the fact that you can debunk almost 100% of them. Okay, if you can debunk almost 100% of them, why are you clinging to the ones you can't? Acknowledge. Virtually all UFO stories you read, if you take all of them, because people are desperately clawing in every story, which is a bad idea. If you're going to do that, all of them have been explained by shit that happened. If you look at all the other UFO reports, gee, everybody triangulating their angles, you know, it's kind of scattershot, but they're all pointing over here, by an airport, or by a place that was shooting off fireworks, or by a place that literally had, not a joke, balloons released with LEDs in them at one point. Or another occurrence where it was flares on steel cabling hung from big helium balloons, literally weather balloons. They bought them on purpose so that people would say the word weather balloons one more fucking time in the newspaper, which they did. Well, you're explaining it away. Sometimes it really is a fucking weather balloon because that's the most efficient way to get something up very high in the atmosphere. You half fill it, I've filled one, and you turn it loose. It goes up very high. The higher it goes, the more it inflates itself a bit, but it's still going to fly. The idea is you don't fill it enough that it pops until it gets to a certain altitude. You can even gauge the timing to where as soon as the flare goes out, or series of them, it pops and drops, and by the time it hits the ground, nothing's hot enough to start a fire. It's also used, if you're not aware of it, as a way to track very visibly which way the wind's blowing. You set up a line of them on a ridge, because most people don't live on the top of a ridge of a mountain range. You set up the flares and release them at the same time. You can track the wind movements over miles, or even hundreds of miles if you want to. You just have to buy a shit ton of flares, a bunch of helium, and a bunch of helium balloons, or in this case, little weather balloons. The smaller ones are used for generic weather surveying. And the flare is easier to track in some cases than radio equipment. It's low tech. It's a fucking flare. In fact, you can buy them in bulk. The people who monitor weather on this planet buy them in bulk. You might want to look at that. But they normally don't get accused of being a flotilla of UFOs. Now we're going to get to the actual simulation that does happen. This isn't a delusion, but it can turn into one. You ready? Okay. I mentioned YouTube's video compression algorithm fucking videos up, doing all sorts of crazy shit to it. That's real. That really does happen. You can demonstrate it by uploading a video and then watching what YouTube turns it into. Upload it in very, very high resolution. In fact, deliberately pick the highest resolution you can get away with. Watch YouTube turn it into 1080p or whatever the fuck it is. Put it up in 60 frames a second if you really want to make it work hard. Come back a week later and see what it did to your video. Compare directly each video in video editing software that will look for differences and tell it to put up a differential video. The differential video, the anomalies, will show you the patches of the video that didn't get compressed and decompressed cleanly at resolution. Look at each of the resolutions and see which one does the most damage to the video versus you rescaling it on your computer. But again, start with a high resolution and just do that. Many people don't even look at the high resolution video on YouTube, right? Now, again, emphasis added. YouTube, Facebook, every place on the internet, assume it's completely fucking compressed to shit. JPEG'd to death. First step. Stop lying to yourself about, oh, well, that doesn't happen. Yes, it does. And that means if it's something I agree with, I'm supposed to assume it's still fucking edited by the computer routines. Next, the raw video, if it was uploaded just as itself, will still have compression anomalies. Video cameras compress shit all the time. Unless you're shooting raw, which means it's going to be gigabytes for a couple of minutes, it's going to take up, smaller space than the worst case scenario. That means it's compressed right out of the camera, right out of the cell phone especially. Please don't lie about it. If it's in low light conditions, it's going to compress it even more. If it's in low enough light, like you're seeing now, it will remove all of the color. My skin doesn't look like this. This is to deliberately encourage YouTube to compress the shit out of it so it's faster to load. It means that people wanting to watch my videos will be able to download them, save them. I can do so. I use YouTube to compress them even more than I'd want them to be because then they take up virtually no space. When I get them downloaded, they're a tenth the size I can make half the time. Unless I go through the effort of compressing them. This is simpler. I'm just being lazy. Now, here we go. Does your brain compress reality? There's a bunch of self-tests you can do to see what level of compression your brain does. There are certain medical conditions and god-awful medications some of you have experienced that make the world into a terrifying place because your brain stops compressing things. You're very much aware of every sound, every little nuance, every visual anomaly that you weren't paying attention to before. It's not because you've entered or exited the matrix. It's because your brain isn't compacting things. Your brain compresses things and ignores shit all the time so it doesn't go completely mad. So you don't consume, 10,000 calories just trying to fucking stir a cup of coffee. I've had to relearn how to walk because of an injury and also to injury to my head. I've had to learn how to see again. Seeing an unfiltered, uncompressed, unbuffered version of reality is absolutely overwhelming and maddening. And thank God it goes away eventually, if you're lucky. For some people, it doesn't. You're compressing just like YouTube. Get over it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.